Jeffrey Russell Hall, better known simply as Jeff, was born on November 21, 1978, in California, the son of Johann Patterson. Little is known about his childhood, adolescence, and family, with only speculations available. However, what is known about his way of thinking and living is truly disturbing. Jeff worked as a plumber and was quite adept at his job, but over time, his employers dismissed him. According to them, there were two main reasons for this decision: his lack of commitment and responsibility, and his controversial beliefs, an issue we will revisit later. In 1999, Jeff married Letitia Neal, and together they had two children, Joseph and Shirley. This is where things began to deteriorate further. The couple led an unhealthy lifestyle, consuming alcohol and drugs, which Letitia continued during both pregnancies. This substance abuse led to significant problems for the infants. Drug use can adversely affect a baby's brain, heart, and lungs, causing lifelong physical, emotional, and learning difficulties. Although the impact on Shirley is not known, we do know how it affected Joseph, a matter we will address later. Once the children were born, problems escalated. Jeff's excessive drinking made him increasingly aggressive, resulting in physical abuse towards his wife and mistreatment of the children. Frustrated by the situation, Letitia filed for divorce and left the family home. Jeff retained custody of the house, while Letitia moved into a small apartment. She met another man, had two more children, twins, and in 2003, alarms began to ring. The newborn twins, just a few months old, required regular medical checkups. During the checkups, it was observed that the twins were smaller and thinner than expected, appearing neglected. The doctors, alarmed by these findings, contacted social services. The family apartment was inspected, and the conditions found were horrifying. It was disorganized, dirty, and there were dishes with spoiled food and worms in the sink. The children lived amidst garbage, appearing filthy, neglected, and consequently, Letitia lost custody of the children. Although the exact location where the babies were sent is unknown, we do know what happened to Joseph and Shirley. The initial plan was to place them with their father, Jeff. However, at that time, Jeff was on probation after being arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. Therefore, custody was granted to the paternal grandmother, Johann Patterson. At this point, it is pertinent to discuss Jeff's life. After Letitia restructured her life, Jeff did the same. He married Krista McCarr, who was younger than him, and together they had 3 daughters. They established their home and supposedly were doing well. In 2004, Jeff decided to seek custody of Joseph and Shirley, and the court granted it. At that time, Jeff was a plumber, a well-paid profession in the United States, and he was considered responsible and committed to his job. However, he was abruptly dismissed, and there are 2 versions regarding this. According to Jeff, he was fired due to the construction sector crisis. In contrast, his employers claimed that he gradually became irresponsible, exhibited extremist tendencies, made inappropriate comments and jokes, clashed with colleagues, and created considerable tension. What began as minor issues escalated into a nightmare, with Jeff developing negative views towards certain groups, particularly Jews and others. Jeff began to believe that whites were responsible for the decline in job opportunities and started to explore the ideologies of the National Socialist movement. In other words, he became a neo-Nazi and was unashamed to openly express his. He shared these views with colleagues and clients, actively sought to recruit others, and his behavior greatly damaged the company's reputation. The tensions among his coworkers were so severe that many refused to work with him or even be in his presence, leading his employers to terminate his employment. By 2009, Jeff was deeply entrenched in these extremist ideas, even leading the Southern California chapter of the National Socialist movement. This group wore uniforms reminiscent of those from World War II, and Jeff gave interviews expressing his frustration with the imposition of multiculturalism on his children. He frequently participated in armed militia patrols along the U.S.-Mexico border, performed Nazi salutes, hosted meetings at his home with like-minded individuals, and produced videos online to recruit more followers. Another concerning aspect was his collection of World War II weapons, including knives and guns, which were easily accessible to his children. Jeff's rhetoric was filled with hatred, but he claimed it was the opposite. He insisted that he was merely advocating for justice, order, and an end to what he perceived as nonsense being taught to his children at school. So convinced was he of his righteousness that in 2010, he ran for local office and received a third of the votes. His outwardly terrifying ideology was matched by an even more disturbing reality at home. Despite his public persona, he struggled with severe alcoholism and took out his frustrations primarily on two people: his wife and his son, Joseph. Joseph, born in June 2000, always struggled with behavioral and learning issues. Remember that his mother's drug and alcohol use during pregnancy significantly impacted him. He was born with various problems, and his home environment, characterized by disorder, chaos, and filth, provided no relief. His father, Jeff, was a violent and unstable individual, which only exacerbated the situation. Neighbors reported 23 incidents to social services, having heard Jeff shouting, insulting, and physically abusing the child. Psychologists noted that Jeff exhibited disorganized attachment as a parent. One day, he would show affection and protectiveness towards the children, while the next, he would be abusive, drinking heavily, hitting and humiliating them. This inconsistency left the children, particularly Joseph, in a state of constant confusion, unsure of what to expect from their father. The lack of normalcy was never explained to Joseph, and Jeff even involved him in his extremist activities. He allowed Joseph to attend his group's meetings, taught him to use various weapons, and even gifted him a belt with the SS insignia. By the age of 10, Joseph had attended 9 or 10 different schools, struggling academically, in each due to his developmental issues, including ADHD and below-average intelligence. He had difficulty understanding social relationships, could not tolerate frustration, and reacted negatively to rejection. His inability to manage emotions led to violent outbursts. He would use pencils and pens to stab other children, and on one occasion, he used a telephone cord to strangle a teacher. His impulsiveness and aggression extended to other children and teachers. He would hit, kick, bite, scratch, stab with sharp objects, and strike with various items. Teachers frequently contacted his parents, but the situation only continued to deteriorate. Despite repeated requests for intervention, suggesting that they consult a psychologist or therapist and talk to Joseph, Jeff and Krista took no action. As a result, Joseph was expelled from multiple schools. At age 10, the couple decided to homeschool not only Joseph, but also his sisters. While this eliminated school-related issues and complaints, new problems arose at home. The sisters became the new victims of Joseph's aggression, and his stepmother, Krista, inflicted physical punishment on the girls, using objects and pulling their hair, mirroring the abusive behavior of Jeff, who was her role model. The surrounding community soon realized that Joseph struggled to understand things in a normal way, and he found it extremely difficult to empathize. However, this did not seem to concern his father. Instead, Jeff believed he was molded. By 2011, Jeff gifted Joseph a night vision scope and taught him to shoot with a handgun, as well as other weapons. Joseph developed a particular fondness for a Magnum 357, which he used to practice shooting in the back. Remarkably, he would occasionally take the gun to his room and hide it. At just 10 years old, Joseph became obsessed with the TV show Criminal Minds. Regardless of what he was doing or who he was with, he would dedicate hours to watching the show. He frequently discussed episodes with his family, a behavior that might seem normal in older children, but was particularly concerning given his age. His viewing was unsupervised leading up to April 30, 2011. On the night of what would become Jeff's final gathering, several individuals came to his home for a meeting, during which they recorded everything on video. Young Joseph was present at this event. Jeff delivered his hateful speech, and everyone present expressed their views before eventually leaving for their homes. Back at the family residence, Jeff, his wife, and their children gathered to watch a movie. As they did, Jeff began drinking beer, consuming one can after another until he was heavily intoxicated, which typically led to aggressive behavior. When Jeff drank, His family knew to remain still and silent, as any movement or noise could make them his targets. However, that night, Jeff was intent on confronting his son. He started harassing Joseph, insulting and intimidating him. As the evening progressed, Jeff became so inebriated that he collapsed on the sofa. Krista then tidied up the living room, put the children to bed, turned off the lights, and thought the night was over. Joseph, unable to sleep, recalled a recent episode of Criminal Minds featuring a story about a boy in a similar situation. In the episode, the boy's aggressive father was abusive towards both the mother and the child. Frustrated and overwhelmed, the boy had used a gun to shoot his father. The episode concluded with the boy facing no repercussions for his actions, leading Joseph to believe he could do the same. At 4 a.m., Joseph retrieved his gun from the closet and went downstairs. Finding his father unconscious on the sofa, he aimed the weapon and fired. The shot woke the entire family, but by the time Krista arrived, it was too late. Krista called emergency services, and when paramedics and police arrived, they began a thorough investigation of the crime scene, looking into how Joseph had accessed the weapons and what had transpired. The police discovered that the house was a hellish mess disorder, chaos, filth, and firearms within reach of children, with no security or locks. It was an extremely dangerous home. As a result, the woman not only lost custody of all her children, but was also charged with illegal possession of firearms and child neglect. Custody of the children was transferred to the paternal grandmother, Johanne Patterson. When the police interviewed the woman, she remarked that what had happened did not surprise her. She knew it was bound to occur sooner or later, but she did not expect it to happen so soon. Secondly, we need to revisit the house's record. Searching everywhere, the police observed that Joseph did not seem particularly distressed. Although he was somewhat uneasy and anxious, he did not cry excessively or appear to be a truly troubled child aware of his actions. Despite hiding the gun under his bed after killing his father, he made statements that did not fully align with the situation. For instance, he reportedly asked the officers, "How many lives does a person usually have?" Thirdly, there is what transpired once the child was arrested. It seems the police did not properly inform the child of his rights, which might sound absurd. But you'll be astonished when you hear what happened. During the interrogation, the Riverside police read out the Miranda warning point by point, which, for those unfamiliar, states, "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to speak with an attorney and have an attorney present during any questioning. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." The government has clarified the previously mentioned rights, which is fine up to this point. However, I pose a question. Do you think a 10-year-old child would understand all of this? Clearly, Joseph did not grasp anything. For example, when the phrase "has the right to remain silent" was mentioned, he understood it as "has the right to stay calm," and did not realize he could simply refrain from speaking and wait to see what would happen next. Despite this, the authorities questioned him incessantly, and the child revealed everything on his mind. Throughout the ordeal, he was accompanied by his stepmother, Krista, who also had no understanding of legal processes or how things worked. Consequently, the child was left completely exposed. There was no consultation with social services, nor was there a psychological evaluation. Adult men interrogated a 10-year-old child, and the interrogation was conducted while waiting for the trial date. Joseph was sent to a juvenile detention center. As the youngest child there, he had no suitable footwear, so Riverside County Deputy District Attorney Mike Socchio personally ensured that he received shoes. It was at that moment that the child reacted in a very peculiar way. Upon receiving the shoes, he appeared very pleased and asked the prosecutor if he could keep them and take them home. This reaction suggested that he did not fully understand what was happening or the seriousness of the situation. The trial took place in 2013 when the child was 13 years old. His reactions were quite peculiar. Some sources report that at times he would cry, lower his head, and appear sad and worried. However, other sources suggest the opposite, indicating that Joseph spent the entire trial drawing, folding pages, making paper boats, and doodling. He seemed detached and unaware of what was happening. Ultimately, he was sentenced to 10 years in a juvenile detention center, which would mean release at the age of 23. After this, there is little information available on the subject. Some sources claim that he is now free and has started anew under a different name and identity, while others do not mention him at all. What is clear is that the prosecutor developed a strong affection for him. On one occasion, he told the press, "I have grown fond of him in a strange way. I enjoy watching him grow and change, but I am convinced that he has fared better in a correctional facility that resembles a military environment. He seems to like it, understands the rules and what is expected of him, and is treated with dignity." Some experts had predicted that Joseph would never rehabilitate and would pose a danger once released. But now it's your turn. What do you think of this case? Do you believe the young man was able to rehabilitate? Well, that's it for today's video. I hope you found this case interesting. If so, please leave a like and a comment below with your opinion about the case.